Frank, we have always talked about these stories and the ex-president as a security threat. And I have followed this reporting, if I haven't always amplified it here on this show. And I detect that from what started as the president's bemusement and ego stoking of monitoring the Maricopa County audit, he seems now to be directing these phony recounts. And I ask you this question all the time, but in that move, what do the extremists hear?
Right. The fact that he is obsessed with these audits, I call fraudits, and that's what they should be called, is what we call in the business a clue. It's because he does foresee the likely outcome, because he is engaged in directing or helping to fund or lead funding for and guiding, and those around him are guiding these fraudits and their outcome. Make no mistake about it. He's not crossing his fingers and hoping. He understands where this is going. And with each report of a potentially new fraudit in some other state, the threat and risk picture grows larger. So here in Arizona, we can probably game this out to 3 possible scenarios of outcomes. All of them don't end well, Nicole. First, a possible outcome, highly unlikely. They announced that they found nothing significant. There really was nothing here. Move along. Unlikely. But even for that scenario, Nicole, there will be a fringe element that says, particularly led by Trump likely, that says deep state, they were in on it. This has been rigged. There is something here, and we have the potential for violence. Scenario number 2, there's some moderate finding. There were some votes miscounted. Some were folded. We don't know what happened. There's some minor questions. Again, Trump will claim victory. Potential for violence here in Arizona or elsewhere. Third scenario, keeping with the general circus theme, bizarreness. Martians came in through the Mexico border, implanted bamboo fibers. Jewish lasers zapped the routers in the voting machines and counted only every third Republican vote. Now we have mass hysteria, and Trump claims victory, holds a rally outside the White House, free beer for everybody who's not vaccinated, and the potential for violence increases. This does not end well. DOJ has got to step in here. I know it's fraught with peril. I understand it, but there are federal laws about securing ballots and voting machines. That's not happening here in Arizona.
You know, Yamiche, I want your thoughts on sort of this intersection of reporting that, you know, we started paying attention to what was happening in Arizona because it seemed to have the potential for all that Frank described, as well as copycat sort of crimes against democracy. That is now what the Wall Street Journal is reporting, that in Pennsylvania, they're touring that debacle to try to bring a debacle of their own to Pennsylvania, another state where Donald Trump fought like crazy against the will of the voters there. I wonder what your sense is of how much folks are paying attention to this now national picture of a slow-moving insurrection, the slow-moving effort, an unrelenting effort, in some ways a more brazen effort to overturn the results of the last election.
Well, folks are definitely paying attention, including civil rights activists who fought for so long and have fought for so long to make access to voting something that was equal across the United States and are continuing to fight that. And here, I think what sticks with me about all of this is that when you look deeply at what former President Trump is doing, in some ways, he's replaying the same tactic over and over again. When he didn't like President Obama, he said he was illegitimate. He said he wasn't born in this country. Now, because he lost the election and he doesn't like Joe Biden, President Biden, he's going off and saying again, he's not a legitimately elected president. And in some ways, what you see here is this twirling of conspiracy theories, this use of conspiracy theories to really scare and in some ways poison the minds of people who will believe some of this stuff. And what you see here is also lawmakers looking at this and seeing a political benefit to all of this. So President Trump, former President Trump, he knows obviously that he's not going back into the White House in August. But he's continuing to say all of this because Republicans are hoping that people will get mad enough to go to the voting ballots and that people will get mad enough to give them back the House. And Kevin McCarthy wants to be the House Speaker. But I think the unintended or intended consequence here, based on who you're talking to, is that there could be real violence. And January 6th taught us as a country just how dangerous it is to lie to people over and over again about the sacredness of the American democracy. Our elections are something that we hold so dear, and it's something that we go around the world talking about. And this, I think, is just in some ways, when you talk to historians, this is, as you just said, a slow-moving insurrection. And democracy doesn't end well when you have half of the country not just not liking and not wanting to deal with truth, but also saying, if my party lost, then that means that someone has to pay and that someone cheated. That's how you end up with republics that don't have functioning democracies. And that's why you have immigrants that have come to our country from Haiti and Venezuela and Nicaragua and so many places coming here saying, at least America's democracy functions. Well, that might not be the case, according to experts, if we continue down this road.
You know, Frank, I want to follow up with you with something you said. The president putting a time period on this seems to also be ominous in terms of creating an expectation that by date certain something will happen. That was the part of the sort of fabric of what became so combustible on January 6th. I wonder what you make of that date and what plans you think are underway from law enforcement.
Yeah, don't be surprised if we see an advisory come out from DHS and/or DHS joint with FBI apprising the nation's law enforcement to increase their security posture in and around this supposed August date, certainly within places that audits are occurring, certainly within the Washington, D.C. area. That advisory is almost a given. Has to go out. Let's not forget, though, as we talk about dates and timing here, the president and his organization are under under state investigation, Manhattan District Attorney investigation. What better way to kind of cry witch hunt than to present yourself as a illegitimately removed president and call this a political witch hunt? They're after me because I am the president. I was illegitimately removed from office and voted out under fraudulent circumstances. This gets the sympathy on his side among his base and paints the prosecution as political. It's the last act of a desperate defendant, by the way, to do this. But this is the environment we're in.